A single empty ammunition can sat beside the machine gun, its metal glowing in the moonlight. 0215 hours. Henderson Field perimeter. Private Sullivan pressed his eye to the gun sight and counted shapes in the jungle. Too many. The Japanese had been probing the line for 3 hours. Now the probing had stopped. That meant the real attack was coming. Sullivan had 74 rounds left. The barrel was already hot enough to blister skin. His loader Jackson had been hit 20 minutes ago. No one else was coming. The field telephone behind him was dead. Sullivan was 19 years old. He had been in combat for 11 days. The jungle went silent. Sullivan knew that silence. He had heard it twice before. It meant they were close. 50 yards, maybe less. He tightened his grip on the traversing handle. The first Japanese soldier stepped into the clearing. Sullivan fired. The barrel glowed red. The M1919 Browning bucked against Sullivan's shoulder. The recoil was familiar. Comforting even. 400 rounds per minute. Not as fast as the German MG-42, but reliable. American engineering. Sullivan had trained on this weapon for 6 weeks at Camp Pendleton. He could field strip it blindfolded, could clear jams in seconds, could maintain rate of fire through overheating. That training was all he had now. Training and 74 rounds. Maybe 73. Sullivan lost count in the first burst. The weapon vibrated in his hands. Each round sent a pulse through his arms, through his shoulders, through his chest. The sensation was constant, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Sullivan had learned to use that rhythm, to count rounds by feeling, by sensation, by muscle memory. His instructors said good gunners did not need to count, did not need to think, just felt, knew, understood the weapon through touch. Sullivan was becoming a good gunner, could feel when the belt was running low, could sense when the barrel was overheating, could predict jams before they happened. That intuition came from hours on the range, from thousands of rounds fired in training, from muscle memory built through repetition, through discipline, through obsession. Sullivan had been obsessed with the Browning since basic training, had studied it, practiced with it, dreamed about it. Now that obsession was keeping him alive, keeping Henderson Field safe, keeping the Japanese at bay, obsession had value, purpose, meaning. Sullivan embraced it. The Japanese soldier fell. Others appeared behind him. They moved in a line, disciplined, professional. These were not the conscripts Sullivan had heard about, not farmers with rifles. These were Marines, Imperial Japanese Naval Landing Forces, elite troops. They wore dark uniforms, carried Arisaka rifles. Fixed bayonets gleamed in the moonlight. Sullivan counted 12 visible, probably more in the tree line. He traversed right, fired a burst. 3 more fell, the others scattered, found cover, returned fire. Rounds cracked overhead. Sullivan ducked. The sandbags absorbed the impact. Thud, 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 methodical, aimed. The Japanese were marking his position. Sullivan knew the tactic. Suppress the gun, maneuver around, attack from the flank, standard infantry doctrine. The Americans used it. The Japanese used it. Everyone used it, because it worked. Sullivan needed to disrupt that plan. He popped up, fired blind. 10 rounds, ducked, moved left 3 feet, popped up again, fired, moved right. The goal was unpredictability. Make them guess. Make them hesitate. Buy time. For what? Sullivan did not know. Reinforcements were not coming. He had heard the radio traffic before the telephone died. Every position was under attack. The Japanese were hitting the whole perimeter. Simultaneous assault. Coordinated. Professional. Terrifying. Sullivan checked his ammunition. 58 rounds. The math was simple. Brutal. 58 rounds against an unknown number of enemy. Sullivan estimated at least 30 Japanese in front of him, probably more. The jungle was thick. Visibility was maybe 40 yards. They could have 100 men out there. 1,000. Sullivan would not know until they attacked. And they would attack. That was certain. The Japanese did not probe and withdraw. They probed and attacked. That was their doctrine, their culture, death before surrender. Victory or death. No middle ground. Sullivan understood that code, respected it, also feared it. Men who did not fear death were dangerous, unpredictable, unstoppable sometimes. Sullivan feared death. He was 19. He wanted to go home, wanted to see his family, wanted to live. That fear made him careful, made him think, made him survive. So far, Sullivan thought about home, Ohio, small town, population 3,000. Everyone knew everyone. Sullivan had been popular in high school, good student, star athlete, baseball, basketball. The whole town came to games, cheered, celebrated victories, mourned defeats. Simple life, normal life. Then Pearl Harbor happened. Everything changed. Boys became men. Men became soldiers. The whole town enlisted. Sullivan, his friends, his classmates. They shipped out together, trained together, fought together. Most were dead now. Sullivan had counted. Of the 42 boys from his town who enlisted, only 7 were still alive. 7 out of 42, 16% survival rate. Sullivan was good at math, good at calculating odds, good at understanding probability. The numbers said Sullivan should be dead, should have died weeks ago. But he was not dead, was still fighting, still surviving, still beating the odds. Sullivan did not understand why, did not question it, just accepted it. Grateful, terrified, determined to keep beating those odds, keep surviving, keep going home. Eventually, if luck held, if the math worked, if God or fate or chance or whatever decided Sullivan deserved to live. Big ifs, uncertain ifs, but possible ifs. Sullivan chose to believe. Jackson groaned. Sullivan glanced back. His loader was propped against the foxhole wall, holding his stomach. Blood seeped through his fingers, dark, thick, arterial. Jackson needed a medic, needed surgery, needed things Sullivan could not provide. Sullivan had given him morphine. That was all. Jackson was unconscious now, or dying. Hard to tell in the dark. Sullivan hoped unconscious. Jackson was a good kid, 20 years old, from Georgia. Talked about peach farming, about going home and planting trees. Sullivan hoped Jackson would get that chance. The blood said Jackson was done. Sullivan pushed that thought away. Focus on the gun, on the Japanese, on surviving the next 5 minutes. Jackson's fate was already decided. Sullivan's was not yet. Jackson had been Sullivan's loader for 8 days. They had bonded quickly, shared stories, shared food, shared fear. Jackson talked about his family's peach farm, 300 acres outside Macon, generations old. Jackson's grandfather had planted the first trees in 1890. His father expanded the operation, modernized, made it profitable. Jackson was supposed to take over, continue the legacy, grow the family business. That was the plan, before the war, before Guadalcanal, before tonight. Now Jackson was dying in a foxhole, bleeding out from a stomach wound. The farm would go to Jackson's younger brother, 16 years old, too young to enlist, too young to fight, but old enough to inherit, to carry the family forward. Jackson had talked about that, about his brother taking over, about teaching him everything, about preparing him. Jackson would not get that chance, would not teach, would not prepare, would not see his brother again, or his parents, or the farm, all because of a Japanese bullet. Random, chaotic, final. Sullivan felt anger. Not at the Japanese. They were just soldiers, doing their job, like Sullivan, like Jackson. Anger at the war, at the situation, at the unfairness. Jackson was a good man, did not deserve this, did not deserve to die at 20. In a jungle, thousands of miles from home, from family, from peach trees, but deserve had nothing to do with it. War did not care about deserve, about fair, about justice. War just killed, randomly, efficiently, indiscriminately. Jackson was learning that. The hard way, the final way. Sullivan could not save him, could only keep fighting, could only hold the line, could only survive, for both of them, for all of them. That was all Sullivan could do, all anyone could do. Keep fighting, keep surviving, keep the mission going, even when friends died, even when good men bled out, even when nothing made sense. Keep fighting. That was the code, the duty, the burden. Sullivan bore it, would continue bearing it, until his own death, or until the war ended, whichever came first. The jungle erupted. Voices, shouting, Japanese. Sullivan did not speak Japanese, did not need to. The tone was clear. Attack, charge, kill. Sullivan grabbed the traversing handle, aimed at the sound, waited. Patience. Let them come, let them commit, then kill them. His instructors had drilled that into him. Patience in combat. Wait for the right moment, then act, decisively, lethally. Sullivan waited. The voices got closer, louder, angrier, then shapes, moving fast, running, 20 men, maybe more. Sullivan fired. The Browning roared. Tracers lit the night. Every fifth round glowed, created a red line between Sullivan and the enemy. The line cut through them. Bodies fell. Others kept coming. Sullivan traversed left, right, fired continuously. The barrel glowed. Smoke rose. The smell of cordite filled the air. Thick, acrid, burned Sullivan's throat. He ignored it. Fired, kept firing, until the bolt locked back. Empty. The jungle had been preparing Sullivan for this moment. 11 days of heat, humidity, insects, disease, exhaustion, fear. Every day stripped something away. Comfort, sleep, sanity. What remained was function, purpose, survival. The jungle was hell, but hell prepared you for war, made you hard, made you ready, made you lethal. Sullivan had arrived on Guadalcanal soft, scared, inexperienced. The jungle changed that, changed him, made him different, better, worse. Sullivan did not know which. Maybe both, probably both. The jungle did not care, just kept grinding, kept testing, kept killing the weak. Sullivan was not weak, not anymore. The jungle had burned that away, left only strength, only will, only determination. Sullivan was a survivor. The jungle confirmed it, proved it, celebrated it, by keeping him alive, by testing him constantly, by never relenting. The jungle was his enemy, and his teacher, his hell and his salvation. Sullivan hated it, also needed its lessons, needed its harshness, needed its truth. The jungle taught that survival required sacrifice, required hardness, required letting go of everything except the mission, except the fight, except the gun. Sullivan learned those lessons, absorbed them, became them. Now he was not soft, was not scared, was experienced, was hard, was ready, was lethal. The jungle made him. Now he would use what the jungle taught, would survive, would kill, would hold the line, because that was what the jungle taught. That was what the jungle demanded. That was what Sullivan had become. A product of the jungle, a weapon of the jungle, a survivor of the jungle. Nothing more, nothing less, everything necessary. The tracers created a light show. Red lines cutting through darkness, beautiful, deadly, hypnotic. Sullivan had learned to read tracers, to use them, to adjust fire based on their path. If tracers went high, adjust down. If tracers went low, adjust up. Simple, effective, visual feedback. The tracers told Sullivan everything. Told him if he was hitting, told him if he was missing, told him how to kill more efficiently, more effectively, more lethally. Sullivan loved tracers, trusted them, relied on them. The red glow was his guide, his teacher, his proof. When tracers hit targets, bodies fell. When tracers missed targets, Sullivan adjusted. The cycle repeated. Adjust fire, mechanical, automatic, deadly. The tracers never lied, never misled, never failed. Unlike people, unlike orders, unlike intelligence, tracers just showed truth. Simple, visual, absolute. Sullivan believed in tracers, more than he believed in officers, more than he believed in anything, except the gun and the tracers. Those were real, those were reliable, those kept Sullivan alive. Everything else was secondary, optional, questionable, but the gun and the tracers, those were certain, those were true, those were everything. Sullivan grabbed a fresh ammunition belt, fumbled with it. His hands shook. Adrenaline, fear, exhaustion, all mixed together. The belt slipped. He caught it, loaded it into the feed tray, slammed the cover closed, charged the weapon. The process took 5 seconds, felt like 5 minutes. The Japanese were closer, 30 yards, 20. They fired as they ran. Rounds hit the sandbags, hit the gun, sparks flew. Sullivan ducked, counted to 3, popped up, fired. More Japanese fell, but they kept coming, kept charging, fearless, committed, ready to die. Sullivan gave them what they wanted. He fired until the belt ran dry, loaded another, fired again. The barrel was smoking, too hot, dangerously hot. Sullivan ignored the heat, ignored everything except the front sight, the shapes, the enemy. He fired until they stopped coming. Sullivan's mind worked differently than most soldiers. He thought in numbers, in equations, in probabilities. That mindset came from his education, from his talent, from his nature. Sullivan saw patterns where others saw chaos, saw order where others saw randomness, saw solutions where others saw problems. That mathematical mind made him valuable, made him different, made him survive. Sullivan calculated everything: ammunition consumption rates, target acquisition times, probability of hits, rate of enemy advance, likelihood of reinforcement. Every variable had a number, every number had meaning, every meaning affected survival. Sullivan tracked it all, processed it all, used it all. His brain was a calculator, computing constantly, analyzing continuously, predicting probabilistically. That gave Sullivan an edge, a small edge, but enough to survive, enough to kill efficiently, enough to hold the line. Other soldiers fought on instinct, on training, on luck. Sullivan fought on math, on analysis, on calculation. His approach was colder, more mechanical, more efficient, also more effective. The numbers proved it. Sullivan had the highest kill count in his unit, the longest survival time, the best accuracy rating. Statistics did not lie, did not exaggerate, did not flatter, just measured, objectively, precisely, truthfully. Sullivan trusted statistics, trusted numbers, trusted math, more than he trusted anything else. Math was reliable, math was consistent, math was true, math did not panic, did not break, did not fail. Math just calculated, always, everywhere, eternally. Sullivan loved that, needed that, relied on that. Math was his foundation, his anchor, his salvation. In chaos, in combat, in war, math made sense, made order, made survival possible. Sullivan would not abandon math, would not ignore numbers, would not stop calculating, because the moment he did, he would die. The statistics proved it. The probabilities confirmed it. The math was clear. Calculate or die. Sullivan chose calculation. Always. Forever. Until the end. The attack broke. The Japanese fell back, melted into the jungle, gone. Sullivan scanned the clearing. Bodies, dozens of them, piled in front of his position. Some moved, groaning, crying, dying. Sullivan did not fire on them. Waste of ammunition. They were out of the fight. No longer threats. Sullivan counted his remaining ammunition. One belt, 50 rounds, plus maybe 10 rounds in the current belt. 60 rounds total. The math got worse. Sullivan had survived 2 attacks. The Japanese would come again. 3rd time. 4th time. However many times it took. They had the numbers. Sullivan had 60 rounds. The equation did not work in his favor. He checked the barrel, glowing orange, too hot to touch, too hot to sustain fire. Sullivan needed to let it cool, but cooling took time he might not have. He poured water from his canteen on the barrel. Steam hissed. The metal cooled, slightly, not enough, but better than nothing. Sullivan had 2 canteens, both half empty. He needed to conserve water, but he also needed a functioning weapon. Priorities. Sullivan poured more water. The barrel cooled more. Still hot, but manageable. Sullivan could fire. For now, that was all that mattered. Now, not later, not tomorrow, just now. Jackson stopped groaning. Sullivan checked him. No pulse. Jackson was dead. Sullivan felt nothing. No grief, no anger, just empty. Numb. Jackson was the 4th man. Sullivan had watched die. First was Miller, killed by sniper on day 2. Then Rodriguez, malaria, died in the hospital tent. Then Kowalski, artillery, direct hit. Now Jackson, 4 dead in 11 days. The attrition rate was unsustainable. Sullivan did the math. If the rate continued, he had maybe 3 weeks left, maybe less. Statistics, probability, cold calculus. Sullivan was good at math, top of his class in high school. His teacher said he should study engineering, go to college. Sullivan had enlisted instead. Seemed like a good idea in December, after Pearl Harbor. Everyone was enlisting. Patriotic duty, honor, service. Those words felt hollow now. Sitting in a foxhole with a dead loader and 60 rounds against an enemy that did not fear death. Honor did not stop bullets. Patriotism did not reload the gun. Only Sullivan could do that. Only Sullivan could keep the gun firing, keep the line holding, keep Henderson Field safe. That was his job, his purpose, his reason for being alive instead of dead. Like Jackson, like Miller, like Rodriguez, like Kowalski. Sullivan would not think about them. Not now, later. If there was a later. Miller had died on day 2. Sullivan remembered every detail. They were on patrol, moving through jungle. Miller was on point, 10 yards ahead. He stepped around a tree. A single shot rang out. Miller dropped. By the time Sullivan reached him, Miller was dead. Bullet through the eye. Sniper, professional, clean. Miller never knew what hit him, never felt pain. Just there 1 second, gone the next. The patrol never found the sniper, never got revenge. Just carried Miller's body back, wrapped it in a poncho, tagged it, shipped it home. Miller was from Pennsylvania, coal country, tough kid, strong, reliable, gone at 18, buried somewhere in the jungle, or maybe sent home. Sullivan never found out, never asked. Asking made it real, made it permanent, made it hurt. Sullivan preferred not knowing, preferred uncertainty, preferred the possibility that Miller was still out there somewhere, still fighting, still alive, even though Sullivan knew better, knew Miller was dead, knew certainty, but belief was more comfortable than knowledge. Sullivan believed Miller was okay, somewhere. That belief helped, made the war bearable, made survival possible, made sense of senseless things. Rodriguez died of malaria, day 6. Sudden, unexpected. He had been fine at breakfast, sick by lunch, dead by dinner. The disease took him fast. Fever, chills, convulsions, coma, death. Medical staff tried everything. Quinine, fluids, rest. Nothing worked. Rodriguez just died. His body gave up, surrendered to microscopic parasites. Defeated by insects smaller than a period, Rodriguez was Mexican-American, from Texas, border town, proud, patriotic, wanted to prove something, prove loyalty, prove value, prove belonging. The war gave him that chance, and killed him for it. Rodriguez talked about his parents, about how proud they were, about how he was the first in his family to serve, to wear the uniform, to fight for America. Rodriguez wanted to make them proud, wanted to honor them, wanted to show he was a real American, worthy, valuable, equal. The fever did not care about Rodriguez's motivations, did not care about his pride, did not care about his parents, just killed him, efficiently, finally, permanently. Sullivan attended the burial, watched Rodriguez's body go into the ground, covered with dirt, marked with a cross, gone forever. Sullivan said a prayer, not religious, but it felt right, felt necessary, felt human. Rodriguez deserved that, deserved recognition, deserved honor, even if only from Sullivan, even if only in a jungle, even if only for a moment. Kowalski died from artillery. Day 9, German-made, captured from North Africa, used by Japanese against Americans. Irony, 3 shells hit the perimeter. Random, unaimed, harassing fire. Kowalski was in the wrong place, wrong time, wrong luck. The shell hit 5 feet from him. Direct impact. Blast killed him instantly. Shredded his body, unrecognizable. They identified Kowalski from his dog tags. Nothing else remained. No body to bury, just pieces, parts, fragments. They collected what they could, put it in a bag, called it Kowalski, sent it home. Kowalski was from Chicago, Polish family, 2nd generation, tough neighborhood, tougher upbringing. Kowalski had seen violence before, street fights, gang wars, petty crime. He joined the army to escape, to find something better, something meaningful, something clean. Found war instead. Found death. Found the ultimate violence. No escape. No better. No meaning. Just random chance and artillery shells. Kowalski deserved better. Deserved more. Deserved life. But desire and deserve were different things. Kowalski got death. Got fragments. Got a bag. That was war. That was reality. That was truth. Sullivan accepted it. Learned from it. Vowed to avoid Kowalski's fate. Stay mobile. Stay alert. Stay away from random shells. If possible. If luck allowed. If fate permitted. Sullivan would try. That was all he could do. Try, and hope, and fight, and survive. 1 day at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time. That was enough. That was everything. That was life. The Japanese came again. 15 minutes after the first attack, Sullivan saw movement. Heard voices. He aimed, waited. They appeared. Maybe 30 men, more disciplined this time, using cover, advancing in bounds. One group moved while another fired. Professional, effective. Sullivan waited until they committed, then fired, short bursts, 3 to 5 rounds, conserving ammunition, making each bullet count. The Japanese fell, others took their place. They kept coming. Sullivan kept firing. His world narrowed. Front sight, target, trigger, traverse, repeat. Everything else disappeared. Fear, fatigue, thought. Just the mechanical process of killing. Load, aim, fire, reload. The rhythm became automatic. Muscle memory, training, instinct. Sullivan was no longer thinking, just reacting, functioning, surviving, 1 burst at a time. A Japanese soldier made it to the edge of the foxhole, 10 feet away. He raised his rifle. Sullivan could see his face. Young, maybe Sullivan's age. Determined, committed, ready to kill. Sullivan traversed the gun. Too slow. The Japanese fired. The round hit Sullivan's helmet. knocked him backward. His head rang, vision blurred. He tasted blood, bit his tongue. Sullivan touched his helmet, dented. The round had not penetrated. Lucky, impossibly lucky. Sullivan grabbed his pistol. Colt May 1911. 7 rounds. He aimed, fired twice. The Japanese soldier fell. Sullivan holstered the pistol, returned to the gun. Fired. The attack broke. The Japanese withdrew again. Sullivan breathed. Deep, slow, controlled. He was alive. Still functioning, still fighting. That was enough. For now. He checked his ammunition. 23 rounds. The math got critical. 23 rounds would not stop another attack, would not hold the position, would not keep Henderson Field safe. Sullivan needed more ammunition. He looked around. Jackson had no spare belts. Sullivan had already checked. The other positions were too far. Crossing to them meant exposing himself. Probable death. Sullivan considered his options. Stay and die when the ammunition ran out, or leave the position and die crossing the field. Both options ended in death. Sullivan chose to stay. At least here he had cover, had the gun, had a chance. Small, but a chance better than none. The Japanese changed tactics. Third attack came from a different direction. Left flank. Sullivan had to reposition the gun. The Browning was heavy, 83 pounds with tripod and water. Sullivan grunted, pulled, dragged the weapon around. His back screamed. His arms burned. He ignored the pain, got the gun positioned, aimed. The Japanese were closer, had used the repositioning time to advance. Smart, aggressive. Sullivan fired. The remaining 23 rounds disappeared in seconds. The bolt locked back. Empty. Sullivan dropped behind the sandbags. Drew his pistol. 7 rounds. Against how many Japanese? Sullivan did not know. Did not matter. 7 rounds was what he had. 7 rounds was what he would use. Then his rifle. 30 rounds if he could reach it. Then his bayonet. Then his hands. Sullivan would fight until he could not. That was the code. The oath. The promise. Defend Henderson Field. Hold the line. Never surrender. Simple. Clear. Absolute. A grenade landed in the foxhole. Sullivan saw it. Black. Round. Fuse hissing. He had maybe 3 seconds. Instinct took over. Sullivan grabbed the grenade, threw it back. Hard. It exploded in midair, 20 feet away. Shrapnel peppered the sandbags. None hit Sullivan. Lucky again. How many times could luck hold? Sullivan did not want to find out, but he had no choice. Luck was all he had left. Luck and 7 rounds. He aimed the pistol, waited. A Japanese soldier appeared. Sullivan fired. Hit. The soldier fell. Another appeared. Sullivan fired. Missed. Fired again. Hit. The soldier fell. Sullivan had 3 rounds left. 2 soldiers appeared. Sullivan fired twice. Both fell. 1 round left. Sullivan waited. No one appeared. Silence. The attack had stopped. Again Sullivan exhaled. He was still alive, still fighting, still holding, with 1 round and a bayonet. The math was absurd, impossible, but Sullivan was still here, still breathing, still functional. That defied the math, defied probability, defied logic. Sullivan did not question it, did not analyze, just accepted. He was alive. That was the only fact that mattered. Dawn came at 0542 hours. Grey light, humid, hot. The jungle became visible. So did the bodies. Dozens of Japanese dead, piled in front of Sullivan's position. The clearing looked like a slaughterhouse. Blood, bodies, equipment. The smell was terrible. Death, gunpowder, jungle rot. Sullivan breathed through his mouth. It helped, slightly. He looked at his position. Jackson's body, empty ammunition cans, spent brass everywhere. His helmet, dented. His pistol, 1 round. His rifle, Somewhere in the foxhole, Sullivan found it, checked the magazine. 28 rounds. He had forgotten about the rifle during the attacks, focused only on the gun, on the pistol. The rifle could have made a difference, could have extended his defense. Sullivan felt foolish, amateur. His instructors would have been disappointed. But his instructors were not here, were not fighting Japanese Marines in the jungle, were not trying to hold a position alone with dwindling ammunition. Sullivan had done his best, had survived, had held the line. That was all he could do, all anyone could do. The perimeter stayed quiet. Sullivan scanned for threats, saw none. The Japanese had withdrawn. For now, they would come back. Tonight, tomorrow, next week. Whenever they gathered strength, whenever they chose to attack, Sullivan would be here, would be waiting, would be holding this position until someone relieved him, or until he died. Whichever came first. Sullivan hoped for relief, expected death. Hope and expectation were different things. Hope was optimism. Expectation was realism. Sullivan was a realist. The math said he should be dead. 60 rounds against multiple attacks should not have worked, but it did. For now, Sullivan did not trust that trend to continue. Probability would catch up eventually. Always did. The house always won. Sullivan knew that, had made peace with it. He would fight, would hold, would die if necessary. That was the job. The duty, the code. A voice called from behind, American. Sullivan spun, raised his rifle. A sergeant appeared, older, maybe 30. He held his hands up, said he was friendly. Sullivan lowered the rifle. The sergeant approached, looked at the clearing, at the bodies, at Jackson, at Sullivan. He asked if Sullivan was okay. Sullivan said yes. The sergeant said he was a liar. Sullivan was covered in blood. The sergeant asked if it was Sullivan's. Sullivan checked, found wounds he had not noticed. Shrapnel cuts, bullet graze on his arm. Nothing major, painful, but not fatal. Sullivan said he was functional. The sergeant accepted that, said relief was here. Sullivan could stand down. Sullivan asked about ammunition. The sergeant said they had plenty. Sullivan said good. He stood. His legs almost gave out. Fatigue. Adrenaline crash. 7 hours of combat. Sullivan had not moved except to fire. His body was stiff. Sergeant broken. He stretched. Everything hurt. He ignored it. Pain was temporary. Death was permanent. Sullivan preferred pain. The sergeant said Sullivan did good work. Held the position. Killed maybe 40 Japanese. Sullivan said he did not count. The sergeant said someone would. Said Sullivan would probably get a medal. Sullivan said he did not want a medal. He wanted ammunition. A new loader. Sleep. The sergeant laughed. Said Sullivan would get all 3. Eventually, first Sullivan needed to see a medic. Get patched up. Give a report. Sullivan said he would give the report now. Get it over with. The sergeant agreed. He asked what happened. Sullivan told him. Simple, direct, factual. Omitted fear. Omitted luck. Just tactics. Numbers, results. The sergeant wrote it down. Asked questions. Sullivan answered. Honest, complete. The sergeant said it was good work. Textbook defense. Sullivan said it did not feel textbook. Felt desperate. Chaotic. Random. The sergeant said that was combat. Never felt like the manuals. Never looked like training. Just chaos. Luck. Survival. Sullivan agreed. That was accurate. That was true. The medic arrived. Checked Sullivan. Cleaned the wounds. Applied sulfur powder. Bandages. Said Sullivan was lucky. Nothing major. Would heal fast. Sullivan asked about Jackson. The medic checked. Confirmed death. Abdominal wound. Bled out. Nothing could have saved him. Not here. Not without a hospital. Jackson needed surgery. Sullivan said he gave morphine. The medic said that was good. Made it easier. Jackson probably did not suffer much. Sullivan hoped that was true. Hoped Jackson died without pain, without fear, without regret. Sullivan would never know. Dead men did not talk, did not share their last thoughts, died alone. Even surrounded, everyone died alone. Sullivan understood that now, had seen it 4 times, would see it again, many times, if he survived. Big if. The sergeant said Sullivan had 12 hours off. Get food, get sleep, report back at 2,000 hours. Sullivan said he could go now. The sergeant said no, 12 hours mandatory. Sullivan needed rest, needed food, needed to process. Sullivan said he was fine. The sergeant said he was lying. Sullivan was running on adrenaline. When that crashed, Sullivan would crash hard. Better to crash in a tent than on the line. Sullivan accepted the logic, nodded, said he would take the 12 hours. The sergeant pointed to the mess tent, said to eat first, then sleep. Sullivan agreed. He walked toward the tent. His legs were unsteady, shaking, adrenaline wearing off, fatigue setting in. Sullivan forced one foot in front of the other. Mechanical, automatic, simple. He made it to the tent. Sat down, hard. His body wanted to collapse. Sullivan would not let it. Not yet. First food, then collapse. Priorities. The mess tent had scrambled eggs, bacon, coffee, real food. Sullivan ate, tasted nothing. His mouth was numb. His tongue was swollen from biting it. He ate anyway. Mechanical fuel. His body needed calories, energy, protein. Sullivan provided. 2 plates, 3 cups of coffee. Then he was done, full, satisfied, alive. Sullivan appreciated that. Being alive, being full, being safe, temporary safety. But safety, he had not felt safe in 11 days, since landing on Guadalcanal, since the shooting started, since men started dying. Safety was a luxury, a memory, something from before. Sullivan savored it, knowing it would not last, could not last. The Japanese were still out there, still attacking, still fighting. The war continued. Sullivan's 12 hours would end. He would return to the line, return to the gun, return to the mathematics of survival. 60 rounds, 40 targets, impossible odds. Sullivan had beaten them once. Could he do it again? Probability said no. Experience said maybe. Sullivan chose to believe experience. Belief was all he had. Belief and training. And luck. Always luck. He found an empty cot. Lay down. Closed his eyes. Sleep came fast. Deep. Dreamless. Exhaustion-driven. Sullivan slept for 10 hours. Woke at 1600 hours. Groggy. Disoriented. His body ached. Everything hurt. Muscles. Bones. Joints. He had not moved in 10 hours. His body had seized up. Sullivan stretched. Slowly. Carefully. Things loosened. Movement returned. He stood. Checked his gear. Rifle. Clean. Loaded. Pistol. Clean. Loaded. Helmet. Dented. Still functional. Uniform. Filthy. But intact. Sullivan was ready. As ready as he could be. He reported to the command post at 1800 hours. 2 hours early. The sergeant raised an eyebrow. Asked why Sullivan was early. Sullivan said he could not sleep anymore. The sergeant understood. Said it happened to everyone. After combat, the body needed rest. The mind would not allow it. Kept replaying, analyzing, remembering. Sullivan agreed. That was accurate. He had woken up thinking about Jackson, about the Japanese soldier he shot with the pistol, about the grenade, about everything. His mind would not stop, would not rest. So Sullivan stopped trying, gave up on rest, focused on the mission, on the job, on surviving. That was simpler, more manageable, more controllable. The sergeant said Sullivan was assigned to a new position, different section of the perimeter, with a full crew, a gunner, a loader, an assistant. Sullivan would be the gunner, the experienced hand, the veteran. Sullivan said he had 11 days of experience. The sergeant said that was more than most. more than the replacements. Sullivan was a veteran now, whether he felt like one or not. Sullivan accepted that designation. Veteran, it sounded strange. Wrong. Sullivan was 19. Veterans were old, experienced, scarred. Sullivan was just scared, tired, lucky. But if the army said he was a veteran, then he was a veteran. Labels did not change reality, did not change what Sullivan had done, what he had survived, what he had seen. Sullivan was the same person, same scared kid from Ohio, same kid who wanted to go home. The label just gave others a way to categorize him, to understand him, to use him. Sullivan did not mind being used. He was a soldier. Being used was the job. He met his new crew at 1900 hours. The gunner was named Peters, 21, from California, nervous, green. This was his first week on Guadalcanal, his first time on the line. He had not seen combat yet. Sullivan could tell. Peters talked too much, asked too many questions, showed too much energy. Combat veterans were quiet, economical with words, with movement, with energy. Everything was conservation. Peters would learn, or he would die. Sullivan hoped for learning, hoped Peters survived long enough to become quiet, to become efficient, to become a veteran. The loader was named Harris, 19, like Sullivan, from Texas, seemed competent. Calm, had been on the island for 2 weeks, had seen some action, not much, but some. That was good. Harris knew the basics, knew what to expect. The assistant was named Lee, 18, from New York, fresh, completely green. This was his first day on the line, first day in combat, first day understanding that death was real, personal, close. Lee would learn fast, or die fast. Those were the options. Sullivan would do his best to teach, to guide, to keep Lee alive. But ultimately survival was individual, personal. Each man had to find his own way. Sullivan had found his, Peters, Harris, and Lee would have to find theirs. They moved to their position at 2000 hours, different section, same perimeter, same jungle, same enemy. The position was prepared, sandbags, foxhole, gun emplacement, good fields of fire. Sullivan approved. He checked the gun. M1919 Browning. Same model as before. Familiar. Comfortable. Sullivan felt better with the gun. More confident. More capable. The gun was reliable. Proven. American. Sullivan trusted it more than he trusted people. People made mistakes. Panicked. Broke. Guns just functioned. As long as you maintained them, treated them properly. Sullivan would maintain this gun, would treat it properly, would keep it functioning. That was his job now, his purpose, his expertise. Sullivan was a machine gunner, good at it, proven. The army recognized that, had given him a crew, had made him the gunner, the leader, the veteran. Sullivan would live up to that designation, would lead, would teach, would survive, and keep his crew alive, if possible. If luck held, if the math worked, big ifs, but possible ifs. Sullivan chose to believe in possibility. Belief was better than despair. Belief kept you fighting. Despair got you killed. The night was quiet. No attacks. No probing. Just jungle sounds. Insects. Animals. Wind. Normal. Peaceful. Sullivan did not trust it. Quiet nights preceded violent days. The Japanese were planning, gathering, preparing. They would attack. Soon, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. But soon, Sullivan prepared his crew, showed them the gun, how to load, how to clear jams, how to change barrels, how to maintain rate of fire. Peters watched, asked questions, good questions. Sullivan answered, patiently, thoroughly. Peters was learning. That was good. Harris already knew most of it, had trained on the Browning, just needed refreshers, reminders. Lee knew nothing, watched everything, absorbed, learned. Sullivan appreciated that. Lee was smart, attentive, would be competent. If he survived, if he got experience, if luck held, Sullivan would do his best to make that happen, would teach, would guide, would protect, as much as possible. But ultimately, the jungle decided, the Japanese decided, luck decided. Sullivan just prepared. That was all he could do. Dawn came without incident. The crew relaxed, slightly. Tension eased. Day attacks were rare. Possible, but rare. The Japanese preferred night, darkness, confusion, fear. Night magnified everything, made small forces seem large, made noise seem closer, made fear seem justified. The Japanese understood psychological warfare, used it effectively. Americans feared the dark, feared the unknown, feared what they could not see. The Japanese exploited that, attacked at night, used the jungle, used surprise, used terror. It worked. Often, Sullivan had experienced it, had felt that fear, had overcome it. Barely, through training, through luck, through stubbornness. Sullivan would not be terrorized, would not panic, would fight, would hold, would survive. That determination defined him, made him useful, made him valuable, made him a veteran. Sullivan embraced that role, that identity, that purpose. He was a machine gunner, a defender, a killer. That was his function, his value, his reason for being alive. Sullivan accepted it, embraced it, became it. The sergeant came by at 0800 hours, checked the position, approved, said Sullivan had done good work, set up proper defenses, good fields of fire, proper ammunition storage, backup positions, fallback routes. Everything by the book, Sullivan said he learned from experience. The sergeant said experience was the best teacher, also the harshest. Sullivan agreed. Experience had taught him well, through pain, through fear, through death, but taught him nonetheless. The sergeant asked if Sullivan needed anything. Sullivan said more ammunition. The sergeant said he would send some. Said the Japanese would attack tonight. Intelligence said a major push, multiple battalions, coordinated assault. The whole perimeter would be hit, simultaneously. Hard, Sullivan asked about reinforcements. The sergeant said none available. Every position was undermanned. Everyone would have to hold with what they had. Sullivan said he would hold. The sergeant said he knew. That was why Sullivan was here. Because he held before, would hold again. Sullivan hoped that was true. Hoped his luck continued. Hoped the math worked. Hope was not a plan, but it was all Sullivan had. Hope and training and experience, and 74 rounds per belt, and 3 belts per gun, 222 rounds, against multiple battalions. The math did not work. Sullivan knew that, accepted it, would fight anyway, because that was the job, the duty, the code, simple, clear, absolute. The day passed slowly. Sullivan maintained the gun, checked ammunition, studied the jungle, memorized firing lanes, identified targets, prepared. Peters helped, nervous energy channeled into useful work. Harris was calm, efficient, professional. Lee was quiet, observant, learning by watching. The crew was functional, adequate. Not great, but adequate. Sullivan could work with adequate, could turn adequate into effective, through training, through experience, through leadership. Sullivan would lead, would teach, would prepare. The crew would learn, would follow, would fight. Together they would hold, or die, trying. Those were the options. Sullivan preferred holding, planned for holding, prepared for holding, would execute for holding. The Japanese would come. Sullivan would be ready. His crew would be ready. The gun would be ready. That was all Sullivan could control. Everything else was luck, chance, probability. Sullivan had beaten probability before, would try again. That was the plan. Simple, desperate, true. Dusk came at 1830 hours. Tension increased. The crew felt it. Sullivan saw it in their faces, in their movements, in their silence. Fear was contagious. Sullivan needed to counter it. He spoke calm, confident, reassuring, told them they would be fine, would hold the line, would survive, as long as they followed his lead, trusted the training, trusted each other. Peters nodded. Harris agreed. Lee looked scared but determined. That was good enough. Sullivan did not need fearless, just functional. Fear kept you alert, kept you careful, kept you alive. Too much fear paralyzed, but the right amount motivated. Sullivan's crew had the right amount, balanced, manageable, useful. They would fight, would hold, would survive. Probably, maybe, hopefully. Sullivan stopped thinking in certainties, started thinking in probabilities, percentages, odds. The odds were bad, but not impossible. Sullivan had survived impossible before, would try again. That was the plan. The Japanese came at 2100 hours. Sullivan heard them before he saw them. Movement, voices, equipment. They were close, very close. Sullivan alerted his crew. Everyone tensed, readied, prepared. Sullivan aimed the gun, waited, patience. Let them come, let them commit. The first Japanese soldiers appeared. 50 yards, advancing in a line. 20 men, maybe more. Sullivan waited. 40 yards, 30, 20. Now, Sullivan fired. The Browning roared. Tracers lit the night. Red streaks cut through the darkness. Japanese soldiers fell. Others scattered. Returned fire. Rounds cracked overhead. Sullivan kept firing. Short bursts, controlled, disciplined. Peters loaded. Fast, efficient, good. Harris was ready with the next belt. Prepared, smooth. Lee watched, learned, absorbed. The crew was functioning, working, fighting, together. Sullivan felt pride. Brief, fleeting, then gone, replaced by focus, by necessity, by survival. He fired, traversed, fired, reloaded, fired. The rhythm was familiar, comfortable, deadly. Japanese soldiers fell. More appeared. Sullivan fired. More fell. More fell. More fell. More fell. More appeared. The cycle continued. Attack, defend, kill, survive. Simple, brutal, effective. The attack broke after 10 minutes. The Japanese withdrew, regrouped. Sullivan checked his ammunition. 148 rounds remaining. He had used 74 rounds. Killed maybe 15 Japanese. 5 rounds per kill. Efficient, but not sustainable. If the Japanese attacked twice more, Sullivan would run dry. The math was clear. Brutal, true. Sullivan needed to be more efficient, more precise, more lethal. He told Peters to reduce burst length. 3 rounds maximum. Make every bullet count. Peters nodded. Understood. Harris suggested aiming lower. Hit center mass. Stop the threat. Sullivan agreed. Good advice. Harris was thinking. Good. Lee asked what he should do. Sullivan said watch. Learn. Be ready to load if needed. Lee nodded. Ready. The crew was adapting. Learning. Functioning. Sullivan approved. They would survive. Maybe. If luck held. If the math worked. If the Japanese gave them time. Big ifs. But possible. Sullivan chose to believe in possible. The Japanese came again. 21:30 hours. 30 minutes between attacks. More than before, they were being cautious. Smart. The second attack came from a different angle. Right flank. Sullivan had anticipated this. Had prepared. He traversed the gun. Aimed. Waited. The Japanese appeared. 30 men, more than before. Sullivan fired. 3 round bursts. Aimed. Controlled. Lethal. Japanese soldiers fell. Sullivan traversed. Fired. Traversed. Fired. Mechanical. Automatic. Efficient. Peters loaded smoothly. No fumbling. No hesitation. Experience was accumulating. Harris had the next belt ready. prepared, anticipating. Lee watched intently. Learning, the crew was improving, becoming effective, becoming veterans. Sullivan fired until the attack broke. Checked his ammunition. 99 rounds remaining. He had used 49 rounds, killed maybe 17 Japanese. Less than 3 rounds per kill. More efficient, better, but still not enough. One more attack would drain his ammunition. Then what? Sullivan pushed that thought away. Deal with it when it happened. Focus on now, on the present. On surviving this moment. The next moment could wait. The third attack came at 2200 hours. From the center, 40 men. Maybe more. The Japanese were committing. This was the main assault. Do or die. Sullivan recognized the tactics. The desperation, the finality. This attack would succeed or fail completely. No middle ground. Sullivan tightened his grip. Aimed. Fired. The Browning hammered. Tracers cut through the darkness. Japanese soldiers fell, kept coming. Fell, kept coming. They were fearless. Determined. Professional. Sullivan respected that. Also feared it. Men without fear were dangerous. Unpredictable. Unstoppable. Unless you killed them. Sullivan killed them. 3-round bursts. Center mass. Efficient, lethal. Certain bodies piled up. The attack continued. Japanese soldiers reached 30 yards. 20. 15. Too close. Sullivan fired continuously. Discipline broke. Survival instinct took over. Long bursts. 5 rounds. 10 rounds. Whatever it took. Peters loaded frantically. Harris was ready. Lee helped past belts. Prepared. The crew functioned as one. Coordinated. Desperate. Effective. The attack reached 10 yards. Sullivan saw faces. Expressions. Determination. Hate. Fear. He fired. They fell. More came. He fired. They fell. The belt ran dry. Sullivan grabbed his pistol. Fired. 7 rounds into 7 targets. 7 Japanese fell. More came. Sullivan grabbed his rifle. Fired. 30 rounds. 30 shots. Maybe 20 hits. Japanese fell. The attack broke. Finally, the Japanese withdrew. Disappeared into the jungle. Gone. Sullivan breathed. Deep, ragged, alive. The crew was intact. Everyone alive. Everyone functional. Everyone veterans now. They had survived. Together. That mattered. That meant something. Sullivan did not know what, but something. Definitely something. Dawn came. The clearing was covered with bodies. Sullivan counted. 73 Japanese dead. His position had killed 73 men. Sullivan felt nothing. No pride. No guilt. Just empty. Numb. 73 men who had families. Lives. Futures. All gone. Because Sullivan pulled a trigger. Because Sullivan did his job. The logic was simple, but the weight was heavy. 73 lives. 73 deaths. Sullivan's hands. Sullivan's weapon. Sullivan's responsibility. He had killed before. Last night. 40 Japanese. But this felt different. More. Heavier. More real. Maybe because he could see them. Count them. Understand the scale. 40 was a number. 73 was reality. Sullivan looked at his crew. They felt it too. He could see it in their faces. The shock, the understanding, the weight they had killed, together, as a crew, as a unit, that bonded them, tied them together, forever. They would never forget this night, never forget the killing, never forget each other. That bond was stronger than friendship, deeper than family, forged in combat, in death, in survival. Sullivan understood that now, felt it, accepted it. This crew was his. He was theirs. United by blood, by fire, by mathematics. They had beaten impossible odds. Together. That meant everything. That was everything. The sergeant came by at 0600 hours, looked at the clearing, at the bodies, at the crew, at Sullivan. He said nothing, just nodded. Approval, respect, recognition. Sullivan nodded back. The sergeant left, came back an hour later with medals. Bronze stars, 4 of them, 1 for each crew member. The sergeant pinned them on, said they had done good work, held the line, saved Henderson Field. Sullivan said they just did their job. The sergeant said some jobs deserved recognition. This was one. Sullivan accepted the medal, did not feel proud, just tired, empty, used up. The medal was heavy, not physically, emotionally. It represented 73 deaths, 40 more from the night before, 113 Japanese soldiers dead by Sullivan's hand, by his crew's hands. 113 families would get telegrams, would mourn, would hurt, because Sullivan pulled a trigger. The medal celebrated that, honored it, recognized it. Sullivan did not know how to feel about that, did not know if pride was appropriate, did not know if guilt was justified, just felt empty, numb, functional. That was enough. For now, maybe forever. Peters was excited. The medal meant something to him. Validation. Proof. Evidence. He had survived combat. Had killed. Had served. The medal made it official. Made it real. Sullivan understood. Peters was young, needed affirmation. Needed to know he had done well. The medal provided that. Harris was quiet. Accepted the medal. Said nothing. Understood its weight. Its cost. Its meaning. Harris was becoming a veteran. Learning that medals were just metal. That honor was complicated. That killing was necessary but not glorious. Lee stared at his medal. Confused. Conflicted. He had not fired a shot. Had just passed ammunition. Helped. Was that enough for a medal? Was he a hero or just support? Lee would figure it out. Eventually would understand that medals were not about individual actions. About heroism. About glory. They were about units. About crews. About collective survival. Lee was part of the crew. The crew earned the medal. Therefore Lee earned the medal. Simple, military. True. Sullivan would explain that to Lee. Later, when Lee was ready to understand. For now, Lee just needed to wear the medal. Accept it. Move forward. That was enough. The crew got 72 hours off. Rest, recovery, rotation. They moved to the rear. Away from the line. Away from the jungle. Away from the killing. Sullivan slept for 20 hours. Woke, ate, slept again. His body demanded it. Required it. Had been pushed beyond limits. Beyond sustainable. The sleep was deep. Dreamless. Healing. Sullivan woke feeling better. Stronger. More human. The emptiness remained, but less profound. More manageable. Controllable. Sullivan could function. Could think. Could plan. That was progress. Small, but real. Enough. He spent the next 2 days with his crew, talking, sharing, bonding. They told stories about home, about families, about dreams, about futures. Peters wanted to be a teacher. Math, like Sullivan's teacher. Harris wanted to ranch, raise cattle, live simple. Lee wanted to paint. Art, beauty, things that were not war, not death, not killing. Sullivan listened, shared his own dreams. Engineering, building, creating, things that lasted, that mattered, that helped. War was destruction. Sullivan wanted construction, wanted to build instead of break, wanted to create instead of kill. That desire surprised him. He had not known it existed, had not thought about after, about beyond, about life past war. But talking with his crew, Sullivan realized he wanted to survive, wanted to go home, wanted to build, wanted to live. That desire was new, fragile, precious. Sullivan protected it, nurtured it, let it grow, because desire was hope. Hope was motivation. Motivation was survival. Sullivan wanted to survive. Therefore Sullivan would survive. Simple, circular, true. The logic worked. Sullivan believed it, chose to believe it. That belief mattered, made a difference, changed everything. Peters talked for hours about teaching, about shaping young minds, about making a difference. He came from a family of educators. His mother taught elementary school. His father was a high school principal. His grandmother had been a one-room schoolhouse teacher. Education was in Peters' blood, in his DNA, in his soul. Peters believed education changed lives, created opportunity, built futures. He wanted to be part of that, wanted to contribute, wanted to help kids like Sullivan, kids with potential, with intelligence, with dreams, kids who needed guidance, support, encouragement. Peters said he saw himself in Sullivan, saw the same mathematical mind, the same analytical thinking, the same potential for greatness. Peters said Sullivan should definitely become an engineer, should definitely go to college, should definitely build things. The world needed builders, needed creators, needed people who made instead of destroyed. The war was necessary. Peters understood that, accepted it. But the war was temporary. Peace would come, eventually. When peace came, builders would be needed. Peters wanted to prepare the next generation, wanted to teach them, guide them, inspire them. That dream kept Peters going, kept him fighting, kept him alive, because teachers needed to survive, needed to go home, needed to fulfill their purpose. Peters was determined, focused, committed. Sullivan admired that, envied it, learned from it. Peters had clarity, had purpose, had direction. Sullivan was still finding his, still discovering what mattered, still understanding who he was. Peters was ahead. Sullivan would catch up. Eventually, if he survived, if he learned, if he grew, Peters would help, would teach, would guide. That was what Peters did. That was who Peters was. A teacher, always, forever, even in war, especially in war. Harris was different, quieter, more contemplative, less verbal. Harris thought deeply, felt deeply, understood deeply, but spoke sparingly. Words were precious to Harris, not to be wasted. Harris's dream was simple: a ranch, cattle, land, space, silence. Harris came from West Texas, big sky country, endless horizons, few people. That landscape shaped Harris, made him value solitude, value simplicity, value independence. The ranch represented freedom to Harris, freedom from crowds, from noise, from complications, just land, animals, work, honest work, physical work, meaningful work. Harris did not need much, did not want much, just enough. Enough land to run cattle, enough cattle to make a living, enough living to be happy. That was Harris's dream. Modest, achievable, real. Sullivan understood the appeal, the simplicity, the clarity, the honesty. Ranching was straightforward. You worked. Animals thrived or died. You profited or starved. Direct cause and effect. No politics, no bureaucracy, no complications, just work and results. Harris loved that, needed that, craved that. The war was the opposite: complicated, political, bureaucratic. Harris hated it, endured it, survived it, but hated it. The ranch kept Harris sane, kept him focused, kept him fighting, because ranchers needed to go home, needed to work their land, needed to live their dreams. Harris would go home, would get his ranch, would live simply. Sullivan believed that, knew it, felt it. Harris had the determination, the will, the strength. Harris would survive, would succeed, would thrive. That certainty comforted Sullivan, made him believe in futures, in dreams, in life after war. If Harris could dream of ranches, Sullivan could dream of bridges, of buildings, of creations. Dreams were possible. Dreams were valid. Dreams kept you alive. Sullivan would dream, would hope, would believe, because the alternative was despair, and despair was death. Sullivan chose life, chose dreams, chose believing in ranches and bridges and futures. That choice mattered. That choice defined him. That choice would save him. Lee's dream surprised everyone. Art, painting, beauty, strange dream for a soldier, strange dream for war. But Lee was strange, different, unique. Lee saw things others missed, noticed details, appreciated beauty. Even in hell, even in war, even in death, Lee found art everywhere. In the way light hit trees, in the patterns of rain, in the colors of sunset, in the shapes of clouds. Lee carried a sketchbook, drew constantly, whenever possible, quick sketches, small drawings, capturing moments, preserving beauty. The sketchbook was Lee's treasure, his purpose, his sanity. Lee showed Sullivan some drawings. They were good, very good, professional quality. Sullivan was impressed, asked where Lee learned. Lee said nowhere, self-taught, natural talent, innate ability. Lee just drew, had always drawn, since childhood. Art was Lee's language, his expression, his truth. Words failed Lee sometimes. Art never did. Through art, Lee communicated everything: feelings, thoughts, observations, truths. The sketchbook was full of war, but beautiful war, artistic war. War as subject matter, not as horror. Lee separated the act from the aesthetic, saw beauty in terrible things, in destroyed buildings, in weapon shapes, in soldier faces. Lee did not glorify war, did not celebrate it, just observed it, recorded it, preserved it, for later, for after, for when peace came and people needed to remember. Lee's art would remind them, would show them, would make them understand. That purpose drove Lee, motivated Lee, sustained Lee. Artists needed to survive, needed to record, needed to bear witness. Lee was a witness, a recorder, a preserver of truth through beauty. Sullivan respected that, admired it, valued it. Lee was important, essential, necessary, not as a fighter, but as a documenter, as a truth-teller, as an artist. The world needed Lee, needed Lee's art, needed Lee's vision. Lee would survive, would create, would share. Sullivan would help make that happen, would protect Lee, would keep Lee alive, because art mattered, beauty mattered, truth mattered, even in war, especially in war. Lee proved that, showed that, lived that. Sullivan learned from that, absorbed that, believed that. Lee changed Sullivan's perspective, opened Sullivan's eyes, made Sullivan see differently. That gift was precious. That gift was priceless. That gift would last forever. Sullivan was grateful, was honored, was blessed to know Lee, to fight beside Lee, to protect Lee. That duty was sacred. That duty was absolute. That duty Sullivan would fulfill, no matter what, no matter the cost, no matter the odds. Lee would survive, would create art, would tell truth. Sullivan would ensure it. That promise Sullivan made, to himself, to Lee, to the world. Lee would survive. That was certain. That was absolute. That was Sullivan's new mission, his new purpose, his new reason. Beyond the gun, beyond the killing, beyond the war, Lee was the reason. Lee was the purpose. Lee was the mission. Sullivan accepted that, embraced that, became that. A protector of art, a guardian of beauty, a defender of truth. That role suited Sullivan, fulfilled Sullivan, defined Sullivan. That role would save Sullivan, would give Sullivan meaning, would make Sullivan's survival matter. Lee made it matter. Lee gave it purpose. Lee changed everything. The 72 hours ended. The crew returned to the line, different position. Same war. They set up, prepared, waited. The Japanese attacked that night. The crew fought, held, survived. Again, the pattern repeated. Attack, defend, survive. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. The crew stayed together, fought together, survived together. Peters became confident, skilled, efficient. Harris became calm, professional, reliable. Lee became capable, steady, essential. Sullivan led them, taught them, kept them alive, and they kept Sullivan alive, covered his mistakes, compensated for his fatigue, supported his leadership. The crew became more than soldiers, became family, brothers, connected by something deeper than blood, forged by something stronger than genetics. War, death, survival. That connection was unbreakable, eternal, sacred. Sullivan understood that, felt it, lived it, every day, every night, every fight. The crew was his. He was theirs, united, indivisible, forever. Sullivan learned something profound during those months on Guadalcanal and beyond in the Pacific Theater, something that changed him forever, completed him as a soldier and a man, made him whole in ways he had never imagined possible before the war began. He learned that pure mathematics alone was not enough for true survival. Numbers could calculate probability, could predict outcomes, could measure success, but numbers could not capture meaning, could not explain purpose, could not define worth. For that, you needed people, needed connection, needed crew. Sullivan had started the war trusting only math, only calculations, only cold logic. That mindset kept him alive, kept him functional, kept him effective, but it did not keep him human, did not give him reason, did not provide meaning. The crew did that. Peters, Harris, Lee, they gave Sullivan something math could not. Purpose, meaning, worth. Sullivan fought for them, protected them, lived for them. That motivation was stronger than math, deeper than calculation, more powerful than probability. Sullivan would die for his crew, would sacrifice everything for them, would face impossible odds for them, not because math said it was logical, but because love said it was necessary. Sullivan loved his crew, not romantic love, not family love, something different, something stronger, brotherhood love, combat love, warrior love, the deepest love that existed. The love that said, I will die so you can live. I will suffer so you can endure. I will fight so you can survive. That love was absolute. That love was sacred. That love was everything. Sullivan had that love, felt that love, lived that love. Every moment, every fight, every night, that love kept him alive, kept him fighting, kept him human. Math alone would have made Sullivan a machine. Efficient, effective, empty, but love made Sullivan a man, a warrior, a brother. That transformation mattered. That transformation saved Sullivan's soul, saved Sullivan's humanity, saved Sullivan's reason for living. The crew gave that to Sullivan, gave him purpose, gave him meaning, gave him love. Sullivan would never forget that gift, would never waste that gift, would honor that gift every day for the rest of his life, however long that life lasted, however it ended, however it was lived. The crew made it meaningful, made it worthwhile, made it matter. That was everything. That was enough. That was perfect. Guadalcanal fell in February. The Japanese withdrew. The Americans won. The crew survived, all 4 members, intact, functional, together. They shipped out to New Zealand. Rest, refit, training, preparing for the next battle, the next island, the next war, because the war continued, would continue, until victory or death. The crew understood that, accepted it, prepared for it, together, as always, forever. That was the code, the bond, the promise. They would fight together, would hold together, would survive together, or die together. No other option, no other choice, just the crew, the gun, the mission, simple, clear, absolute. Sullivan believed in that, lived that, became that. He was a machine gunner, a veteran, a leader, a survivor. That identity defined him, fulfilled him, sustained him, through all the fighting, all the death, all the horror. Sullivan held on to it, because that was all he had, all he needed, all that mattered. The crew, the gun, the mission, everything else was noise. Everything else was irrelevant. Everything else was past. Sullivan lived in the present, fought in the present, survived in the present, one moment at a time, one fight at a time, one night at a time. That was enough. That was everything. That was life, for Sullivan, for his crew, for all of them, united, indivisible, forever. That was the truth, the only truth that mattered. In war, in combat, in survival, the crew was everything. Sullivan knew that, believed that, lived that, until the end. Whatever end came, whenever it came, however it came, the crew would face it, together, as always, forever. Henderson Field was why they fought, why they bled, why they died. The airstrip was critical, strategic, irreplaceable. Control of Henderson Field meant control of the Solomons. Control of the Solomons meant control of the supply lines. Control of supply lines meant control of the Pacific. The logic was simple, clear, absolute. Henderson Field was the fulcrum, the pivot point, the linchpin. Lose Henderson Field and the entire campaign collapsed. The Japanese knew that. The Americans knew that. Everyone knew that. That was why the fighting was so intense, so brutal, so relentless. Both sides understood the stakes, understood the value, understood the necessity. Henderson Field must be held at any cost, at any price, no matter the casualties, no matter the suffering, no matter the horror. Hold the field. That was the mission, the mandate, the absolute imperative. Sullivan understood that, believed that, fought for that, not for abstract concepts like freedom or democracy or justice. Those were words, distant, theoretical, disconnected. Sullivan fought for concrete things, for Henderson Field, for his crew, for the mission. Those were real, tangible, immediate. Those were worth dying for, worth killing for, worth everything. Sullivan would hold Henderson Field, would defend the airstrip, would keep the planes flying, because without planes the war was lost. Without Henderson Field the Solomons were lost. Without the Solomons the Pacific was lost. The chain of logic was unbreakable, undeniable, true. Sullivan was a link in that chain, a small link, but essential. Every link was essential. Break one link, and the chain failed. Sullivan would not break, would not fail, would not be the weak point. His crew would not break, would not fail, would not be weak. Together they were strong. Together they were essential. Together they were unbreakable. That belief sustained them. That belief drove them. That belief kept them alive, and kept Henderson Field secure, and kept the planes flying, and kept the war winnable. That contribution mattered. That contribution was measurable. That contribution was real. Sullivan could see it, could count it, could calculate it. The math was clear. Sullivan and his crew had killed 113 Japanese soldiers. Those soldiers could have overrun Henderson Field, could have destroyed the airstrip, could have ended the campaign. But they did not, because Sullivan stopped them, because Sullivan's crew stopped them, because the gun stopped them. The math proved it. The statistics confirmed it. The logic was unassailable. Sullivan and his crew were essential, were valuable, were necessary. That knowledge gave meaning, gave purpose, gave worth. Sullivan was not just a killer, was not just a soldier, was not just a cog. Sullivan was a defender, a protector, a guardian of Henderson Field, of the mission, of the future. That role was noble. That role was worthy. That role was enough, more than enough, everything necessary. Sullivan embraced that role, lived that role, became that role. Defender, protector, guardian. Those titles defined him. Those titles fulfilled him. Those titles would sustain him. Through all the battles to come, through all the islands to invade, through all the years of war remaining, Sullivan would defend, would protect, would guard Henderson Field, the mission, the crew, the future. That was Sullivan's purpose. That was Sullivan's meaning. That was Sullivan's truth. Forever, until victory, or death, whichever came first.